Michael,
Here.
John,
Here.
Joycelyn, Michelle, Ron.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. Everyone's here.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Teresa, would you also have the record note that we have our CEO and our legal counsel here?
Okay.
So the first matter is approval of the agenda. So I believe that's a motion item. So anybody care to move that we approve the agenda?
I'll move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Michael.
Was that Michael?
That was
Okay.
Michael, yeah.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It's been moved and seconded that we approve our agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
That was all right.
And abstaining, it's a pass, great. Second matter is to approve the minutes of our April 5th meeting. So could we have a motion for that, please?
Yeah, I move to approve the minutes of the April 5th meeting. It's Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Second.
Second.
Second, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of our last meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstaining? Thank you. Well, start off with the best, we have our counsel from Wallach and Patterson joining us. And Megan Blackwell Patterson comes to us. She has her degree from Bellarmine University and the University of Kentucky Law School, where she was in law review, has a great amount of national clients that she and her firm serve, and will be giving us I mentioned she'll be serving as the umpire on some issues we have. And Megan, please.
Thank you very much, Ron. Happy to be here. I am speaking on a legal advice perspective for what comes up in regards to the hiring for the CEO and the director position. And I commonly put the toothpaste back in the tube for lawsuits after something's gone wrong in employment law. And so that's where my experience will come from. And I've looked into some specific issues that have been requested to look into. The first is the minimum statutory requirement for the library CEO position. And I've brought some handouts so that we can all look at what I'm looking at and where I'm coming from. So first, there is a statutory section, and Ron had pointed me to the important statutory sections as well as the Missouri Public Library Standards, which I'm looking at. And the first is Missouri Revised Statute 182.640. And on the second page on subsection 10, that is the important standard. And so according to Missouri law, the board is required to employ a duly qualified graduate librarian. And so that is the key terminology, a duly qualified graduate librarian as the chief executive and administrator officer of the Consolidated Public Library District. So that's all that we get in the statutory section. But then there's the Missouri Public Library Standards, and the last version, which was 2005. The second page of the handout includes a section called Personnel that comes from page 16 of the Missouri Public Library Standards. And legally, when you've got standards or guidelines on a statutory section, those are usually incorporated into what you should be doing. For instance, the Department of Labor has a handbook that interprets many of their statutory standards, and it turns into a lawsuit if you're not actually following what the handbook says in regards to how to interpret the statute. So here in the standards under personnel, it states, and if I didn't say it, the public library standards were issued by the Secretary of State and the state librarian. The statutory section considers a consolidated library district, such as this one, a political subdivision of the state of Missouri. So following the standards of the Secretary of State of Missouri and like the state librarian is something that I would highly recommend. So under personnel on page 6, under standard 1, it says each library district has to have a regular, paid, and properly qualified director, chief executive. And then if you go on page 17, there's a guideline in regards to what standard 1 means under number 1. And as it applies to this, as it applies to the Mid-Continent Public Library, we're looking at, my understanding is a population of over 20,000 plus. And so the director chief needs a graduate degree in library and information studies from an American Library Association accredited program. So that gives us a little more clarity on the duly qualified graduate librarian. And those words are things that we will want to include in the job description. So my legal advice is to follow this guideline and this standard from the Missouri Public Library Standards. And on this point, while I was reviewing the Missouri Public Library Standards, I just want to note that there was an appendix 2 on core competencies of a director, which was on page 20. And it has a list, which is your third handout, of the abilities that the director needs to have. And I won't go through each of them here, but I suggest that those abilities are also placed in the job description.
Megan, can I interrupt just for a second? So, Michael, I apologize. These are not on board docs. Do you have a electronic copy? Email us, or
Yes, after the meeting, I could email.
okay, Michael, we'll get them put up when we get a copy of those.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
And I can get them to you now, but Michelle and Joyce will get them when they come in, but we have enough.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So I just open the floor on what I've seen and what I've found, if there's any
Yeah.
questions.
Megan and I had been in contact previously, and my concern, concern's a good word. My concern is that we have, in comparison to other professions, for example, state law requires that for somebody to practice law in the state of Missouri, one must have a law degree from an ABA accredited school of law. Engineers and architects also are required by the state Board of Licensing to have degrees from the industry recognized comparison to, for example, the American Bar Association. When you go to the professional registration for librarians, it's not only listed, has no requirements, librarian as such is not listed. And my concern, if borderline fear, is that we have requirements that if they are not required by law, absolute mandates, that we have a de facto effect of excluding people who would otherwise be good librarians, but typically would fall within categories of protected persons. That's called discrimination. And that's something I want to make sure we don't accidentally delve into by past practices or by seeking out the so-called best and the brightest. So those concerns I had to be resolved, and thankfully we have somebody here to be that umpire. Also notice you did say that these are things we should do, and I'm interpreting that as things that we must do.
I would interpret it that way.
Okay.
I have too many examples legally of how someone who has interpreted a statute in the sort of authority that this Missouri Public Library Standard was interpreted, they will go back and say that you didn't follow our interpretation, and then that was a violation of the original statute.
Okay.
They read it in.
Sure.
And there is no case law, no administrative decisions where I've ever seen someone do this wrong and they've actually come back legally and upheld it. So it just hasn't gone there before.
Sure.
Yeah, and comment, John. Also, we have to be aware of potential applicants and what they look at when they look at the proposals from the district, the solicitation for their interest.
Absolutely.
Then they will look at what that says, and if it doesn't say things that are acceptable to them in terms of what they're accustomed to, then they are unlikely to apply. So.
Yeah, and my thought, if we have things that are unnecessarily, and I stress unnecessarily too exclusionary, that we're not going to be cast wide enough net into the applicant pool,
Mm-hmm.
with the basic effect of having a very unacceptably discriminatory result.
Yeah.
Again,
And I did, for my third topic, print the job description that was used last time.
thank you. Yes.
And we can get to that there. There are some requirements that are not right here in these statutory sections or the guidelines or the standards that we can talk about.
Right. I mean, in the existing job description.
Right. That was used last time, is my understanding.
And that's your core competencies.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay. Do we want to move on to managing risks when hiring new employees? This one is a little bit of a broader topic, and I consider it the most important topic today. I did not send materials ahead of time electronically, so I will get those over to you, Teresa.
Okay, thank you.
But I did put together a handbook for managing risks when hiring new employees that I am not going to go through verbatim today, but it will be good to look back on before actual interviews. And it applies to more than that. Basically, employment discrimination in hiring happens when a job candidate is treated less favorably than other employees or candidates because of a particular attribute. And so we have what are called protected classes. So based on many federal laws and our Missouri state laws, the protected classes generally include age for someone 40 or over, race, ethnicity, color, gender, country of origin, birthplace, citizenship, disability, sex, sexual orientation or gender identity, marital status, family status, pregnancy, and religion. So in hiring, what we really need to pay attention to is that we are avoiding unintentionally discriminating against candidates, one, in the job description, two, in asking the interview questions, which is usually where most of the litigation comes from, three, in making a final hiring decision and in what's considered, and then fourth, in pay. So if we go through each of those, in regards to job description, the best way to handle it is to just have in the job description responsibilities and qualifications that are very objective. And you can state in your ad, you're an equal opportunity employer, which the last ad did, and that nothing in the job posting guarantees employment. To give examples of certain words or phrases that may exclude a protected class, I've got at least one. For instance, if you say you're looking for a hardworking, qualified individual, that's acceptable. But if you state you're looking for a young person with lots of energy, that can turn into a discriminatory class. Interview questions are the hardest and probably the longest part of my topic today. Most of the legal claims arise from hiring decisions that are based on statements made or questions asked in interviews. It sounds super easy. Okay, I'm going to stay away from these categories in my questioning. But you are developing a rapport with someone, you're getting to know someone, and how do you normally do that in conversation? You ask about their family, you ask about their kids, you ask about their hobbies. But all of those things are pretty much off limits. Many of you are meeting me for the first time today. Questions that we would have in general conversation we can't have with applicants. So the best way to handle it is to have some core questions that you're going to ask everyone. And decide in advance also what information will disqualify a candidate, which will be the same for everyone. And you can go into it, so it's not going to be easy, but with those two understandings. If you have those two goals and you try to keep to that straight line, then that's the best way to stay out of litigation. So if you go to page 4 on my managing risks when hiring new employees handbook I put together some examples for each type of discrimination and protected class. I did this because that's generally how you end up seeing what you can ask and ways to ask things legally and then ways you can't. If you ask a question that is not intended to get into a certain area and it gets there, that's very common. It happens to me in most interviews. The best way to handle that is to just back up. Don't ask for more information on it. You now have information you probably shouldn't. And you want to make sure you're not considering that, discussing that when considering the candidate or deciding if that affects this candidate when hiring. So for instance, on age and genetic information, because it falls under a couple federal statutory issues, but you can't ask when you were born. During the interview process, you can't ask what's your date of birth. You can't ask when did you graduate high school or when did you graduate college. You can't ask when did you enter the workforce or when do you expect to retire or what are your retirement plans. Some people come in and say, I plan to work 3 more years or I plan to work 5 more years. That's one place to immediately back up and go back to your job qualifications. And again, not something you'll want to discuss or consider if certain people were not there.
They need a degree, but you can't ask them when they got it.
Well, you can ask them when they got their degree that's required in your job description, but you can't ask when they graduated from college.
Got it.
Yes. And so the can questions are once hired and the decision's made, you can then get the age and the date of birth, of course. Also, if you have a legal requirement, which we don't for a job, if it's, for instance, someone who's over 18 and they need to go work in the bar industry, you need to know if they're over 18, and you're okay to ask that question. So,
Nikki, can I add one on that real quick?
Yes,
It's interesting
please,
to our industry. It's not going to come up in this hire, but the Children's Internet Protection Act requires that minors only have access to computers that are fully filtered and things like that. And so that actually does handcuff us a lot on who we can hire to work at the library. So you can't bring a 17-year-old in and help them and then expect them to be able to check in books because that's a computer. The computer can get access to the internet and makes you in violation of CIPA. So there's some interesting, I don't think you're going to hire a 17-year-old library chief executive, but it is interesting to know about some of the other hiring challenges
No, but like
that
what
we
I said
have
when you
here at
left the
library.
room, I mean, we're getting a little ridiculous when we need, oh, you need a degree, but I can't ask you when you got it. I mean, I guess you could ask for that specific one, but I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Come on.
Right. If someone sits down and says, I've been in this industry for 27 years, when did you start? When did you get this degree? When did you do this? Those are things that are based on your specific job requirements that are already in your job description, which makes them safe. And
I get it all. We're just going to have a fundamental disagreement on what I think is ridiculous and what isn't. So it's fine.
No, I appreciate that, Michelle. And that's fine.
I get it. I
The law and the practicalities are difficult in this area. And Steve, for your example, you can just put in the job description that they have to be over a certain age, and then you can ask if they're over a certain age. So if everything ties together, then you can keep everything very clean. On race, color, and ethnicity, you can't ask what is your color, what is your ethnic background, what nationality are you. However, if you have an affirmative action program in place and you're asking every single candidate across the board, then you can. You can ask the questions that the affirmative action program has put in place. Birthplace, country of origin, and citizenship. You can't ask, are you a U.S. citizen? Where are you from? Where were you born? What is your background? How did you learn Spanish? Where are your parents from? What is your national origin? Your name is exotic. Where are you originally from? But you can ask, are you eligible for employment in the United States? If we hired you, can you show proof of citizenship? And if you have something in your job description on languages, you can ask if they have other languages that they speak or write.
But we'd have to ask that to every candidate.
You would, and it would need to be in your job description as something required.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we might run into, because this is an international job and there are lots of organizations that represent libraries that are international in nature, and that they put out publications. And I probably know that there are some people in Canada who would be interested in applying for this job. So we have to keep that in mind also.
If you're willing to hire a non-US citizen, I mean, that is something we will want to spell out clearly in the job description so everyone knows what we're looking for and what we're open to. Disability, we have COVID, and so it gets a little complicated because everyone's favorite topic is how they've survived the last couple of years, or how it's affecting them now. So keep that in mind. Most inquiries about a disability or a medical condition count as illegal interview questions. Do you have a disability is not allowed. How did you lose your leg or arm? Have you ever filed a workers' compensation claim? Are you in good health? Do you drink socially or have you used illegal drugs? The job requires you to lift heavier than 20 pounds. Have you had prior medical problems that would prevent you from being able to do so? And did you take any sick days or extended medical leave last year? Are all no's. But you can ask can you perform the duties of the job for which you're applying? And so our next topic is going to look at the last job description. And there's a very nice section on what the essential physical duties are of the job. So as long as you list them in there as a requirement, then you can ask can you perform the duties of the job for which you're applying? And you've got it listed and you're figuring out your answer. If every applicant needs to take a medical exam and pass as a condition of employment, then you can send them to the doctor or the nurse practitioner that handles that, and that's totally fine. I didn't see any sort of medical exam required in the last position. Correct.
Can we make that a requirement? We can, if everybody has to.
And
You'd have to be specific of what would disqualify a candidate.
you would.
Well, I mean, do we do drug testing?
No.
So that's a biggie for me. It's a huge one for me.
We do background checking after an offer has been made, but we don't do random drug testing.
And most drug testing is after an offer is made too in the industry.
I mean, that one just to me is because that's, if we can't ask about it, but that doesn't mean somebody isn't using something. And that's going to affect their ability to do the job.
Right. Right. So you can't ask because it's considered.
I get we can't ask,
Right.
but that could be a part of it.
Megan, I had a question.
Please.
If I recall, one of the at least recommended traits was to have a driver's license or be able to drive. And I'm just wondering do we bump up against like AGA and VFOQ and all the alphabet soup stuff like that?
We do, but if you put it in your job description and it is a requirement to travel, it can include driving, it can include flying and having time to do that, then you're asking if they have the ability to do that. There's case law out there where people have asked if someone has a car and can use their own independent car. And because it wasn't in a job description, that was considered discriminatory in different sectors. So if you do need someone to have their own independent car and be able to use it, you can put it in the job description and ask in that way.
I'm thinking more along the lines of, is it a, in terms of getting back to the bedrocks, would that be an essential requirement that you would think of as opposed to the reasonable accommodation sort of thing, like we know we have a coworker drive or Uber or whatever?
And that's totally up to you guys. I read the Missouri Library Standards on all of the different things. And I honestly, you're going to know more than me, especially you, Steve, on what it takes to do this job. So if you have the ability to give someone a driver to help them with travel, then you could remove that qualification. If you feel that it's absolutely necessary, and the jobs that the Missouri Public Library Standards expect make this director partially a lawyer, partially in charge of HR and need to know all of the employment law, definitely in charge of being very technical in regards to library standards, policies, national. It's a very broad umbrella for this position. And so if you feel that you could get someone to still be able to handle everything and not drive themselves, then I'd remove it from the job description.
Okay. That was just an example, you know, of the wish list compared to the core.
It was a good question. I'm going to hit on driving.
I think we should give some real thought to that, because given that our district is larger than 3 states, being able to visit the branches.
Oh, no, I absolutely, I agree.
We just would have to know how would we accommodate that if we remove that as
Yeah.
an expectation.
Well, yeah, the map clearly demonstrates it's a very large district, but my thought is that it's necessary that our CEO provides his or her own transportation, or is that something we can make available for him? If we have a fantastic person who's maybe has a physical challenges and can't drive around, are we just going to say, can that person?
Right.
And I think that'd be rash. Yeah, thank you.
Gender, sex, and sexual orientation, questions that cannot be asked. What's your gender? Here's a very common one. Do you wish to be addressed as Mr., Miss, Mrs.? Not in the interview, can we ask that? All of these things would lead to more information. What is your sexual orientation? How do you identify? You even need to be careful about asking about emergency contacts after the fact, because if you ask, you don't want to ask for a relative that they want to have notified anymore. You want to make sure that you're asking for a person to be notified in case of emergency, so that you're not tying it to some kind of family relationship. Please.
What about the pronoun preferences for fashionable? Can you do that?
After the fact. Asking in the interview would give you knowledge of something, potentially sexual orientation or gender. You even, and I'm going to hit on marital status, family, or pregnancy.
But what if a lot of times you're in a conversation with somebody and you address them the wrong way and then you offend them. But if we can't ask, then we just take the chance of offending somebody.
Well, if they let you know, again, it's something where you then know you're going to respect that and you're backing away from that, and not considering it as part of your qualification. Natural conversation and getting to know anyone is going to go into all these topics. And you are then going to have knowledge. And what happens is they then come and sue you and say, well, I told you that I had a 5-year-old and you knew that I had COVID and I had a lot of a hybrid schedule. So you decided to choose this person over me. And that isn't even male or female. I mean, there's a lot of discrimination in regards to fathers that are having to deal with this. Or why don't you have someone else taking care of the child care in your family? And so you just want to back away, but then you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to consider it. You don't want to be in a group considering those factors. So-and-so told me this. And what they'll do is they'll come back and say, well, I told you that this person that you hired was not in that protected class. And so they immediately make the assumption and try to prove to a jury of 12 people that that was the reason you didn't hire them. And you're going to get knowledge, but being able to back away from it is the best way to handle it. Marital status, family, or pregnancy. You cannot ask questions about pregnancy, plans for family, children and child care. They're all illegal job questions. You cannot ask about their family, if they're married, if they have children, if they have grandchildren, if they're single, what's your marital status? Who do you live with? Do you plan to have children and when? What is your maiden name? And this can apply to both men and women because many men are also changing their name at this point. Even if the applicant's obviously pregnant, you can't ask about her pregnancy and when she's due. So all things to stay away from. You can't ask about childcare arrangements. You can't ask about the spouse or their partner's job. All things to stay away from. But you can ask, can you perform the job duties in the job description? If you need them in the office 5 days a week, then that's in your job description. You can ask about it, that's fine. They're going to figure out whatever they need to figure out to go and actually handle the job. Have you ever worked under a different name is a question that's allowed in a professional capacity because they may have had publications or other information under that additional name. And a lot of times you're looking at your intent in asking these questions. So this one can fall, especially in this position, under a legally valid question. What hours and days can you work? That's totally fine.
So those could all be parts of a standardized questions that everyone is asked. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Because that's the big takeaway, I think, here is that you have to try best you can to get a group of questions which are very meaningful and important for the job and meet the requirements of law, and then ask everybody those questions and
Right.
not get into extemporary, discussion.
Right. And your conversation will flow. Each person will have more that you'll want to know about. And then just staying away from any of these triggers. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Could there be backdoor concerns, like a question like what days can you work? If a person is Orthodox, no religion, certain days one would not work. So is that kind of a backdoor way of saying we don't like, or we want to get information about one's religious faith?
Yeah, really good question. And we're going to get into religion.
Okay.
But yes,
Yep.
it could hit on religion. It could hit on childcare issues. It could hit on caregiver issues if there's someone they care for in the home. But if it's in your job description and you're requiring a certain number of days in a certain place or travel to certain branches as discussed or other conferences, then you're able to make sure that they can handle those things. And I almost like better, not that the world is going to ever be perfect, here's your job description and can you do these things, is the safest route. But if you're open to letting someone else tell you and figuring out if you can figure that out for your position, like hybrid, remote, all big discussions. I want to work from home 2 days a week and I want to work and go to branches 3 days a week and do my other job. If you're open to that, then you can open those doors to those broader questions to see if it works for you.
I like what you're saying though. This is what it is. Can you do it?
Right.
Keep it simple.
Right. Religion, you cannot ask, obviously the library is not a religious organization, so you really can't ask anything. You can't ask, are you religious? You can't ask, what religion are you? You can't ask, what's your denomination? Who's your pastor? Do you attend church? What religious holidays do you observe? To your point, Ron, you can ask, are there specific times you can't work? Which then borders potentially on that. Or what hours or days can you work if you were leaving that open? And then there's some gray areas in the law. They are not actually called improper, but case law has placed them in an area based on the question that has been held improper. But they also have been held to place an employer in some bad light and led to some more conversations about illegal territory. So for instance, height and weight are a big question, and it's been found that it can tie into race, but you can ask, can you do all the job duties on the job description? Financial information.
You
These
can't
questions-
ask that?
You can ask.
Oh, you can. For a second, I thought you said you can. I'm like, what?
No, sorry. Financial information. These questions have been held to allow discrimination against minorities. So you can't ask, do you own or rent your home? Are you in debt? Have you declared bankruptcy? Do you have a bank account? Have your wages been garnished? Do you own a car? Unless it's part of the job description, you can ask about the car. So coming back to Ron's point from earlier. Unemployment status, you can only ask about unemployment status if you're asking all the candidates and if you're either rejecting all the candidates on the unemployment status. You can't ask about it otherwise. If they are employed somewhere else, it's perfectly legal to ask how much time they would need to transfer from that job to this job. It's just the word and the terminology that you're asking. You would, in that vein, get to know that they're not unemployed, but that's not the purpose or your intent.
Can you ask questions such as, are you active in professional library organizations?
Yes. And we're going to come to hobbies, organizations, and that's a tricky area too. Again, something naturally when you're developing a rapport you want to talk about is what do you do in your free time, but doing it carefully.
But there's nothing, say we have an employee that doesn't have a car or whatever, instead of, I'm just throwing this out there, but I mean, there's nothing saying instead of, I mean, if they have a reason why they can't drive, that's fine. But I mean, there's a lot of employers out there that provide a vehicle. There's no reason we couldn't do that.
Yeah, in fact, we might want to talk about that as an item in.
But we honestly might, because it might even be, I mean, I guess it would depend on the person and how they do their, you know, personal taxes and things like that on what's more beneficial to them, but it might not. I mean, I know, you know, from my past life, we have had take-home cars before, and I mean, sometimes it's.
And we do for some positions here as well. I mean, there are a handful of positions, but the director's car allowance or car assignment ended in the mid-70s. And so since then, the library's always been paying mileage for the director. But for example, Dustin has a library issued vehicle because we expect him to report to, you know, potentially dangerous situations at 3 a.m. and so, or
Well, I mean,
incidents at 3 a.m.
gas prices and the amount of driving that the director has to do at this point in time, I don't think it's unreasonable for us to have that discussion. I mean, truthfully.
Yeah, we have provisions for that. It's just something I never chose to push because it worked for me. I think it was the same. Where it happened with Dick is, you know, our library van that we have, where we drive people around. Dick made us drive by a library van with that sort of mileage on his personal vehicle. And so.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
that's
yeah.
what I'm saying. I mean, I actually kind of think it's a smart.
But I think that's kind of a decision that we can hold off on.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, yeah, we can.
It was just popped into my mind, and if I don't say it right now, it could be 6 months before I remember that.
I think what I was wanting to share is that we do have staff policies in place.
Okay.
If the board's decision is to assign a vehicle to the library director, there are policies in place for that already.
Yeah, because having been in that circumstance in a number of times, if you're a public figure and you have a car, particularly one that's marked, but even if it's not marked, and you stop by the grocery store on the way home, why some good citizen will call and say, you know, I saw the city manager buying alcohol at the local grocery store in a public vehicle. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why most city managers don't like to have a marked car of their own. They would like to get mileage on their own car.
And the only other thing I'm thinking of as a lawyer is you got liability if there's an accident, and how you handle all of that.
Yeah.
There's still potentially, they're in the course and scope of employment using their own car issue as well, but.
Yeah.
So organizations, to go to John's question, the problem that they've found in case law is they've linked it to gender, race, or age inquiries when you're asking about organizations. So you don't want to ask about non-professional organizations, what fraternity you were in, what local country club you were in, what clubs or societies do you belong to. But you do want to ask, because it's very important for your job, what professional associations or organizations you belong to, job-related organizations, and have you been involved in?
Yeah, just want to know their professional activity. What is it that they've done to, that normal professionals do when they're following a disciplined career?
Right. And I wanted to let you know also, I'm going to put it to the end, but on page 11, it's under the heading laws are constantly changing and evolving. Things are constantly changing and evolving. So the one I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is the last one. On March 14th of 2020, the EEOC released new guidance similar to our Missouri Public Library standards. It's not what the statutory section says, but they are interpreting the statutory section, the EEOC is. And so with COVID-19, upending employees' work-life responsibilities and creating challenges for them with caregiving, which could be for parents that can't get vaccinated and can't go out, or other family members. It could be for children because the schools are closed down. It warns the employers that you can discriminate against caregivers and that could be unlawful under the employment laws. They're reading it in. So caregiver is not identified as a protected class, but it can fall under the protected classes, including age, disability, or genetic information laws. So basically the EEOC has put us on notice that is something they will consider and consider actionable. So examples that they gave that would apply here, refusing to hire an applicant with a family member that has a disability that exposes the family member to a higher risk for COVID-19 because of potential increase in health insurance costs. Refusing to hire a female applicant based on the assumption that because she's a female, she would have to focus primarily on caregiving for her younger children or for her parents. So those are hiring examples. I also listed some of the other examples the EEOC gave since it's new guidance. On COVID, there is no vaccine mandate here, correct? Okay, and that would be my recommendation anyway. So there is no need to ask if someone's vaccinated. I find that most search firms are putting if people are vaccinated or boosted, and that's not on you, that's on them if they've asked that question. But it's not something to get into.
How can they ask that if we can't ask any?
You would put it down as a requirement in your job description, and that's not.
I was gonna say, I didn't think we could ask any health-related things anyway, so
Right.
why?
People just sit down and tell you what they've been doing for the last 2 years, or the reason I haven't been employed is because of COVID, and then they start to go into details. It's pretty much the first thing off of most people's tongues. So being able to back away from that, but here, if there's no vaccine requirement, I don't think there's any need to mention it at all.
I think the common theme that I'm in this is stick to what is required to do the things of the job.
Yeah.
And if you stick to that and it's in your list of things and it's on your questions, then you're in a safe category. Like we can't ask them when did they go to school, but we can ask them, did you attend an ALA accredited graduate program?
You can ask them about their employment after then.
Yeah.
Those are all valid to considering them as a candidate. It's the wording and the intent of the questions.
Well, I think it's important to remember that these are in place because people have been excluded from jobs for non-work related issues. And that's what we're trying to avoid. It seems real handcuffy, but there's a reason why all these are here.
And just to add my experience, I mean, probably of the, I don't want to speak for anybody, but of the people in the room, certainly I've done hiring and done hiring recently. And one of the things that tends to happen is best intentions. So you go in with a really good game plan, and then somebody walks into the interview room and they're wearing their Rotarian pin. And before you know it, you're saying, oh yeah, I belong to a club too. Well, boom, all you were doing was exactly what you're talking about, where you're just trying to, ease the tension a little bit, make people feel a little bit more comfortable, get to know the person a little bit better, and you accidentally violated a big rule. That's what tends, I think that's what happened when Marvin asked me how old I was in the interview. He really wasn't trying to violate a rule, but he really muddied the water, or potentially could have muddied the waters.
Yeah.
So,
When I first moved to Kansas City, I sat right there while the person interviewing me figured out where I lived in Kansas City based on my address. Why was that necessary for the job? I had a car, I had transportation, I could get to the job. But those are the type of things that, oh yeah, I have friends that live over there, and but that is irrelevant.
Megan, down the road, when we actually start to interview a person, if they're very free in sharing information of a private nature, what do we do? Just be mute and simply sit back and let them talk, or suggest they curtail that, or?
It's a personal preference on how you handle it. I've never said, oh, wait, that's discriminatory, or I can't talk to you about that, so let's stop. I think it makes it uncomfortable. I have been in situations where someone has just friendly had a conversation and asked the wrong question because they weren't thinking, which could probably happen to any of us. But I just back away and take them, okay, well, let me ask you this. You're sort of in charge in that interview situation. You're trying to find the best candidate. They're trying to please you and show you they can do the job. So you can say, okay, well, I have limited time. Let's move back over here. And so there are ways to, without addressing it as blatantly, move the topic back to where you want it to go. And then you just have to somehow have amnesia about what they told you.
Yeah, I'm envisioning somebody has a full picture of their children.
Yeah.
And when you say nothing, they assume that we're seeing them as unpleasant looking kids or something like that.
Or they start bringing up problems with their last job. If you ask them about what are the most important qualities of the position that you would like today, if you could create any position you wanted. And then they start talking to you about how they had problems with hybrid childcare, or there's a family member that's super concerned about them coming back to work in the office. All very, very common right now. So all of those topics apply to all of our 4 big things, which is the job description, the interview, making the hiring decision, and pay. And so it's pretty easy. It just tailors into the hiring decision. You want to avoid considering any protected classes when making that decision. Any information you have that would fall into any of these classes that's outside of the job description. You want to look at their universal skills and abilities to be successful in the role instead. And look at your list of disqualifying factors, which you've already predetermined, which apply to anyone. Once they've got those issues, they're out of the candidate pool. And then pay. There's the Equal Pay Act. The best practice is to just make the salary range known and confirm if the candidate's interested in the position that way. Your search firm can obviously do that. You can ask, what are your salary expectations for this position? There are states, no federal law in Missouri have not picked this up, that do not allow you to ask about their past salaries. But federal law in Missouri have not picked that up, but there are several, 6 or 7 states that say you cannot ask those questions. We've asked questions throughout, but as far as protected classes and considerations, any other thoughts?
Last time we went through your contract, Steve, the board went ahead and set a salary range. So we have somewhere to start, but it might be good to revisit that, given the market, and see if that salary range is still applicable.
Right, and also the other things that go with the job, the things that we supply, health insurance, retirement and so forth. That might be something that we would visit when we're looking at the whole remuneration issue.
It's a fair point, John. The one thing that I'll mention is that the library director has always traditionally had the exact same benefits package as all other employees, and it has been really good. There have been many circumstances where I've been able to quickly blunt a conversation about all the special benefits and things that I have, which I don't have, because I'm exactly the same as everyone else.
I think that's
critical.
Critical.
I mean, if people lose a lot of respect for you, if you know, especially in a organization like this, if you're not doing the same things.
If you're not walking the same walk. The one thing that the library director has that other employees don't have is professional memberships. So because part of the assumption is that the library director will be involved in professional associations, full membership to American Library Association, Public Library Association, Missouri Library Association are part of the contract. For other employees, they're given a small stipend to offset costs as opposed to a full. But that's the only difference that I have compared to everyone else.
And if we hire somebody that has a dual MLA and dual MPA, is that public administration membership as well?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, ASPA, the Association for Public Administrators, American Association, which I've joined that off and on personally. So.
Yeah, there's even a movement, I just read about it, and I can't remember where I read it, but where MPA organization, or universities that provide MPA degrees are looking at a combined, sometimes they now do combined attorney, legal, and that, and sometimes they do civil engineering and that, and now they're looking at librarian and that, interestingly.
The Truman School at MU does that. They issue a combined
Is that right?
MPA
Yeah,
and
okay. Yeah.
MLS. Yeah.
The only other thing I would add is that when you get into litigation later and you've done everything you can, hopefully that will not be the case here. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this beforehand. They are going to dig into things that aren't lawyers don't realize, but your text messages around anyone as part of the committee, every single email you've ever had, they're going to go back in the server. They can pull things up that have been erased. So be very careful in your communication to not talk about any protected class issues. And documents somehow are more important than just testimony.
Question, Ron? Please. Yeah. I'm not saying we will get into this, but if we should decide that we were going to have, let's say we had narrowed to 3 candidates and we felt sort of equally well about all 3 candidates, but we'd be interested to see how they reacted to public presentation. So could we arrange, let's say we arranged a presentation where the candidates would be invited to attend, and it would be sort of like a social mixed, organization, but they would each make short presentations about their qualifications and so forth. That's done, and a lot of times in city managers, police chiefs.
It's done in police chiefs.
Police chiefs all the
Every time. They're doing it in Kansas City now.
Yeah, they're doing it in Kansas City right now. That's right. So I can just see that being I can see people, you can't control what people ask,
But it would be interesting even to take, a few questions,
You can take filtered questions, but I wouldn't make it a free for all.
No, but I don't think it's a bad, with the police chief, I've gone to them. They're sitting up there on the station, they take a certain number of questions. I don't think it's fair to filter the public's questions. If they want to ask somebody something, I think it's a great thing.
What is our liability if we provide a forum like that and they start asking questions in these protected?
Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah, that's really
Presentation
my
part,
concern.
not a problem. You can test your candidates as long as you're testing them in legal manner. The whole point of the questions that would be asked is the information you would gather and what would you consider. And so you just open yourself up for someone to come in and say, you learned this in this situation, and now you've considered it, and now you've selected a candidate here that's outside of that protected class that I was in.
Okay, but the library director is going to be in public.
Correct.
They're going to be in public settings. They're going to be out all kinds of places, meetings and whatever. They're going to be talking to people all the time. We can't
once you've hired them, then you're no longer in the realm of what did you consider when hiring them for discrimination. And you're not, as the public library, asking questions then during their employment and then changing their employment based on those answers. So out in the public, once they're hired, the application forms that someone needs to fill out once they're hired, an I-9 for the government, it's going to give you all kinds of information in here, but they've been hired. You haven't discriminated in choosing to hire them. And then you just have to make sure, which is what you guys do every single day with how many different employees, that they aren't given an adverse employment action based on being in a protected class every day. But when they're out in the public, that's not your responsibility. That's someone doing that as a third party.
Unless it's part of our application process.
Unless you're considering it. And so what you're always going to do
The
is
way people are
defend.
gonna interact with everyday citizens should be something we think about. I mean,
You're going to always defend your intent in asking a question. And you're going to always defend what you based your decision on. And those are the things that you want to make as transparent as possible. Why did I ask that question? It led over here. That wasn't my intent. And how was I going to use it? And how did I use it? But a lot of that, unfortunately, is in your head. And so as long as you haven't put on paper, here I'm not considering this person because of this protected class and I think it's going to affect their job, that's good. But then you're going to be sitting up there saying, yes, I knew this, but I didn't use it. And it's all in your head. And there's going to be a plaintiff's attorney on the other side saying who wouldn't use it. This person you hired over here is not any of those categories. And you excluded these 3 other people, including my client. And so it's always your intent in asking the question. And then what did you actually consider?
so it sounds like it's probably
So have a
more trouble than it's
presentation.
worth.
No, have a presentation.
Yeah.
I'm reaching
Have a
that.
presentation. Give them a test. Make them put a paper together for you. Have them go and speak at a association they belong to that's a professional one and go attend. Do all those things. But then having anyone under the sun ask questions and you potentially having information then is
Yeah.
the only danger.
Yeah.
But no test. I test all day long.
And that's a
See an
danger
action.
with the police chiefs. I mean, when they.
Well, it
when they choose
is.
that-
I mean,
When they choose to do that, and Kansas City's doing it now,
oh, they've always done it. They don't care.
they have done it.
That's why we get what we get all the time.
We're not on,
We
we're
are.
not on mic, but yeah,
We are. Whatever. It is what it is. Nothing I haven't said before.
And just to remind you,
And
I did, actually, I remember this because I helped in terms of technology. I actually, Dick gave me the information he wanted for his presentation. And I actually built the PowerPoint for him because I could do PowerPoints and he couldn't. And I had to train him and I kind of coached him up to make him a better candidate when he was being hired for the position. I also did a presentation in the boardroom. And some of you who were there might remember that in the middle of the presentation, a small herd of deer walked by the window and it just, at that point, the presentation was over because we lost Carol Coots because she was looking out the window at the deer. And that was it. You don't remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were in the other room, closer to where that was.
Oh, yes, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that has been part of the SOP for the last couple of years. And I do understand that it can muddy the waters, but certainly even if there was a public presentation, but no board members were present. Now, obviously someone could report something back to you and all of that, but it would, if you really were dedicated to this idea of a public presentation with public Q&A, if there were no board, you just hire Nick Haynes to be an MC for it and you just do it that way. And no board members are present, then it would probably
We
be a
like
little
not
bit.
have to watch either.
And you wouldn't watch and la la la, la,
Yeah.
but it might make it a little bit more defensible if it were ever challenged. I mean, because then the question would become, how would you have even known because you weren't there? So,
And what
I'm kind of-
feedback would you
Yeah,
get?
what
and what
feedback?
feedback would
Yeah.
you? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great question.
It's like it's
It
to get
does.
feedback. And
It does kind of ruin the point.
Yeah, I kind of like I withdraw the question.
Well, I think it's
Like
perfectly
Michelle.
all right to have a public forum where they present and maybe have a standard set of questions that they can respond to and have the public give you feedback. I mean, that would be
That's
would be
a
the safest
safer way to
route.
do it, for sure, yeah.
That would work. That would work.
That's something we'll have to think about.
Yeah, I definitely don't, I am not in any way saying don't give them a test or a presentation. I think that's great to see what they're going to do and to know what you're getting without it being varnished
'Cause you
by
wanna
past experience or someone else's help.
Yeah, you want to see how they are with the public, but you don't want to risk the public putting us at jeopardy.
Yeah, one technique that I'm familiar with is the inbox technique, where you construct a series of memos that are like in the inbox. It used to be an actual inbox, but now it would be online, and just say, here's your emails for the day, and have 5 or 6 constructed that would be ones they would have to respond to it. Everybody would be asked to respond to exactly the same things, situations, actual situations. Now you'd have to be careful what situations that you pick to put in the question. Of course, they'd have to meet the test, but.
I mean, I see both. I think that's excellent. I think, and I also see the benefit to doing something in public, because a lot of us do better dealing with an inbox than dealing with talking in public.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it would be interesting to see. I think we do have to, I don't think candidates deserve to get blasted by the public by any means. So maybe even asking for people to submit some questions, kind of seeing what is important to the public first, and then we formulate the questions, because I do think they have a right to, at the end of the day, we all for everybody. So I think they need to be able to express, have some input. But I do think, the way it's done is.
And we might be able to construct a format of input from the public about the kind of issues or the kind of person that we should be looking for online.
I think once we
that would
see,
give everybody an equal opportunity.
I think once we've got the job description. I think we know what kind of person we need, and then we see who applies, and then ask for input. What are the things that are important to them, and see what we get, and then formulate those questions, and then ask them all, so that it truthfully, so it isn't, I don't want anybody up there uncomfortable because somebody's angry about something, and making it a personal friend. Just seeing how different people respond. I don't. But I do think it has to be done. Give them input, but make it fair for everyone.
Anything else on that topic? Okay. Number 5 was review the proposed candidate qualification list, and I had asked Ron for the last job description. And I at least printed it out, and again, Teresa, I'll send an electronic copy. That one?
Position overview?
Position overview.
Oh, okay, that's it.
And so from our discussion earlier, I actually moved experience and training up here from the end, from what was originally there. It has Master Degree of Library Science, Master of Library Science degree issued by the American Library Association accredited program, which is what we've determined we need to follow. It also has at least 10 years of extensive experience in professional library management, and it has a Master of Business or Public Administration degree is strongly desired. Like I said, all of the requirements in this Missouri Public Library Standard really make this person part a lawyer, part needing an MBA, definitely needing a Master of Library Science degree. But the only thing that is required is the Master of Library Science degree issued by an American Library Association accredited program. So in regards to creating this position, there is nothing in this position overview that is discriminatory on the language. I thought it was well written. The essential physical abilities. So you can ask, are you able to perform all of the duties of this job, are on the end of page 3 onto page 4. If you want to beef anything up in here on what you want to have as a requirement, so you can ask universal questions. You'd want to do that on the front end. I referenced it earlier in the Missouri Public Library Standards, and there is a handout on it. Appendix 2 on page 20 has core competencies of a director. And I did not see the exact language that is here in this job description. So I would suggest adding them. You don't have to use it verbatim, but just making sure that we've covered these core competencies in the job description. Other than that, I think that each of you and Steve can provide further feedback on if this accurately reflects the job duties and the key components of the job. To me, and I do not work in this world, this is very lengthy as well. So if you feel that everything in here is needed, then leave it. But if there are some things that are not that important to questions you'll ask, the qualifications you want, then I would tailor it down a little bit.
There may be some overlap between the core functions in this.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be a way to remove some of these if we add the core function part. And I think that when we're interviewing, it would be good to have like a rating sheet for each of these areas that we can then rate and make notes on for each candidate, because after a while they'll all get muddy together. But if we have some way that we can objectively rate each of the candidates on this, I think would help our discussion and keep our discussions to specific items.
I have a question. It's been determined that we will have a MLIS graduate degree. I was not aware of this, but it was brought to my attention about a month ago that there are different focuses within the program. And I believe the University of Missouri has one that would be perfect here. The University of Central Missouri has one that's geared for a school library, which may be of marginal benefit. Do we want to clarify what kind of masters we want?
Right. I think you definitely can. I don't know what your candidate pool is. You might want to ask the search firm as well, to make sure that you're not excluding some of them. I agree with you that if it's someone that's more focused on school children, you're probably missing a large part of the population.
But it's an ALA accredited master's. So
it is.
Say what it is.
It is. It absolutely is. So I think you're going to want to look for something that's more universal of the position.
Governmental oriented, yeah.
Right.
Well, and one of the things or one of the places where that can come out is in the 10 years of extensive experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in a lot of our academic careers, you know that you went to college for one thing, and then you got out and kind of went a different direction, and that became your career. Gosh, I'm trying to think of some good examples from my own. I know that there were a handful of people who were, there's a fellow I know, Dennis. He was planning on, when we were graduating college, he was sort of in the public library track. There isn't a degree, there's no specialization. So like, for example, if you get a bachelor's in arts degree, BA from the College of Arts and Sciences, and then there's a specialization, history, English, etc. There's no similar correlation in the library world. So you get the master's in, or for example, the MA in library science, library and information science. It's not an MA in library science for public libraries, for example. That doesn't exist. So asking about the qualifications might end up happening. What ended up happening with my friend Dennis is he took a bunch of classes with all of us public librarians, and then he ended up going his first job out of school was a reference librarian at a community college, and he's worked at community colleges ever since. And, you know, if you asked him what was his academic experience, it would have been in public libraries, but he's been a community college librarian for 35 years. He's not a public librarian, even though that's what his education. So maybe getting to that expertise, you know, what is that 10 years experience might be beneficial. Ron, I'll throw myself under the bus. Ron and I were the ones who were talking about the difference in degrees. And where the real distinction comes is in things like a K-12 librarian who's really interested in aligning collections with curriculum and standardized testing and things like that, which public librarians never think about. And it really is sort of white noise for us. If you go to school as a law librarian, actually you've got a JD as well as an MLS. And that's really a very different experience than somebody who's interested in providing story times and early literacy and things. So really the question may end up being about what is the 10 years of experience and what does that look like and how has that informed you professionally?
You can make that as tight as you want before you go in with a job description, or you could leave it a little more open to explore with the experience angle. Just knowing what would not work for you is what I would suggest in that situation, your disqualification list. I didn't have much more on this. Looking at it from a legal perspective, it's good. You've even got the language at the end that is necessary. The job description is not intended to be all-inclusive. Employees may perform other duties as required to meet the ongoing needs. So you've got the basics of what you need. The question is, what do you want to search for? And I think that concludes all of the agenda items that I was slated for today.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah.
Ron, if I can make two others, just
Please,
real quick
absolutely.
on this. So on page 1 where it says manager MCPL leadership team expectations, and that goes on for, you know, bottom of one page and almost the first half of the top of the next page. That might be one that you might feel might be a candidate to cut. I'd encourage you not to do that, in part because this is the leadership team expectations for all members of the team. And again, it gets to kind of the same conversation we're having about fringe benefits, that you don't want to exempt your leader from the same standards that you're expecting all other managers to comply with. And so just one note. And then the other note is that in the fully formatted version of this, there is an update date on it. And it's something like 2006 or something, but it has clearly been updated since then. And you know, just one piece of evidence to that is that if you look at the managers list at the very end, it says capital improvement project manager. That's Jake's position.
Sure.
And so at the very least, we touched this when we brought Jake on board in 2017. So it may not be quite as old as it says. I think we just forgot to update the date.
One small area that could be done is the non-essential job functions. Because if a person's doing all the rest, they're going to be attending workshops, they're going to be talking to other library systems. It's only an eighth of a page, but
Right.
it's also non-essential. So
It's not essential.
Yeah, I feel quite confident this is very, very much updated. The thing that caught my attention was reference to face masks. So that's, a few years ago. So. More?
No, I am done unless you guys have any questions for me.
There will be many coming, I assure you. Many, many, many.
That's very helpful, though. I really appreciate.
Thank you for having me. I like to talk about things up front.
Yeah, that's the best.
it's easier than getting the face.
It is. It is.
Okay, our next item, and Steve, if you don't mind taking the lead on this about the search firms.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about what I was doing with this. So what I started doing from our last meeting is there was I believe that there was a feeling that that the committee wanted me to figure out what the potential interest would be in search firms here in the being able to help with managing. As you might remember, part of the conversation that we had was around, whether or not, what exactly was the capacity of our staff to help with the management of a hiring and onboarding procedure. And we were definitely of the opinion that that might not be something that our staff had the capacity to do, nor was it really necessarily a best practice. So I started searching my Rolodex and started talking to people that I know who do this line of work. I think I ended up contacting and speaking with, I think, about 8 different firms. And these are all firms that have experience in hiring chief executives of public libraries. So I didn't really look at generic headhunter groups or anything like that. Of those groups, the 2 that I've given you the summary about, these were the 2 that felt like they could engage with us for a number of different reasons. There were a couple that just said their book of business was too full, that they had a lot of work that they were doing. There were a couple that said that they just preferred not to work with us at this point in time. But these 2 firms were the ones that came forward and said they wanted to, had capacity and could work with us. Coleman Liu, actually I'm trying to remember, the Shanna, I think is her name, who's the chief operating officer there. Yeah, she is actually very excited about working with us. She wanted to fly up for this meeting to meet you all face to face. She's headquartered in Charlotte. I told her I thought that was a little premature. let's let the committee talk a little bit and figure out exactly what's going to happen. But they had the capacity and we're ready to go right now. I actually felt really good about the phone call and feel confident in recommending them to you. One of their most recent hires was the library director for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg, actually called the Public Library of Charlotte-Mecklenburg County. And so they have a pretty fresh Rolodex on executive directors, which I think is important to know. She also recommended putting Ron in touch with the president of their library board, just to kind of talk about the experience and how all of that went. Koya Partners is, I think they're headquartered on the West Coast. I don't remember exactly, but their most recent work in the library world was Seattle Public. So they actually recruited and found the library director for Seattle Public. They have a little bit tighter book of business. They said that they, although interested in working with us, they probably couldn't start working with us until well into summer, just based on timing and being able to help out. So trying to think what else I need to share about these firms at this point in time. Seems like there was something really important, but I don't remember what it was. I think once I boiled this down to these 2 firms, both of which had done a recent hire. Oh, I remember what my point was. Once I boiled it down to these firms, I did send an email, I think, out to Ron, and I can't remember if it was to the whole committee. If you wanted me to expand my search to other firms that do executive search, but not necessarily library, don't have particular library experience. And I have not expanded it out to that point right now. The other thing that I did share with both of these groups was that I have an assumption about what the potential universe of qualified candidates are for this job. And I could be wrong. And so I wanted to run it by these 2 folks who've kind of worked in the info. Actually, I talked with, I think, 5 of the 7 firms about my assumption about what the universe of qualified candidates is. And my assumption is that, if you post this and you advertise for this, we could get 1,000 applications nationwide. But Several of those folks are not going to be educationally qualified. Several of them may be educationally qualified, but really don't have the experience. They're just looking for a pay bump. When you actually look at who are the people who are, sort of how do you sift through all of that information and actually find people who are actually qualified to do the job and willing to move to Kansas City and, all of those sorts of things, you're probably only talking about a universe of about 100 people, which is pretty small. And so finding the right 2 or 3 out of that 100 people is a sizable effort. It's a lot different than, just hiring, an entry-level accountant for a position or something like that. And so investing in a search firm that can actually sift through those 1,000 applications, that 900 of them are just going to be people who are looking for a bigger paycheck, but not necessarily can do the job, those sorts of things. And getting down to that 3 or 4 great candidates, I think would be really worthwhile. And I think either one of these firms, in fact, Coleman Liu, when I talked with Shanna, she said her big goal always is to provide 2 candidates that you cannot make the wrong choice. She said many times her clients are angry because she doesn't bring in the ringer, that she brings in 2 candidates and you cannot, and it's just going to be a matter of taste, style, something like that ultimately ends up being your decision-making process. But both of the candidates that she will bring in are going to be excellent candidates. And in fact, she was kind of alluding, I think on the phone call, she was alluding to the number 2 at Charlotte as an example of that. The number 1 at Charlotte is Marcellus Turner. He's actually the new library director there. And he was previously at Seattle Public, previously at Colorado Springs. He's one of my oldest friends in the profession. Very good hire. And so, I can sort of walk you through that process, talking to Marcellus about the process. That's kind of what I've come up with. I did also, I was asked last meeting to kind of post a query. And so I did that as well. On the ULC listserv, I just generally posted, who do you use? Who have you been, who have you been found by? Who do you like? Who do you dislike? And I actually contacted all the people. Actually, the names that kept coming up were Bradbury Miller, Koya, Coleman, and a firm out of Illinois were the 4 firms that always came up most frequently. And we contacted all 4 of those. So, Ron, does that kind of talks about my experience and what I found out. So
yeah, I appreciate the effort you're doing. We all do. I was especially impressed, again, as a layperson on the Coleman firm, and especially as you mentioned, they had placed people in library structures comparable to this. So that's so important. But with regard to looking for a person who has executive ability outside of the library profession, I just wanted to maybe what Megan said, if that's should maybe not pursue for decision or committee decision to look for an executive outside the library experiences. Is that something we want to look at?
I wouldn't think so.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, I think it's pretty clear that we need to stick with the requirements.
The tenure requirement, the education requirement, the whole business. Yeah.
And the question that I had is, for example, CBIZ has a spin-off company that does executive searching. They have no experience in finding librarians or government executives. And so I've been holding off calling them.
I think that's
based
right,
on, just waiting for input from this meeting. So
it's sort of like the new CEO search for Brett Long would not be somebody from Boeing, which doesn't fit.
So, my recommendation at this, I feel both of these firms are ready, both of these firms are interested in working with the library. As I mentioned, Coleman Liu is interested in working today, based on what Shanna said. But that's not my decision. That's all your decision, and to figure out what to do next. I'm just bringing the information.
I think a couple things come to mind. First of all, as a committee, do we want to focus in on the Coleman firm? And secondly, how do we approach them? And I would encourage that we go through Steve. And thirdly, once we go down that process of interviewing each other, I'm assuming we'd have to go to the full board to have enter into contract with a search firm with them. So,
Right.
Like, I mean, you're saying we need to interview both of them, right? Or you just want to?
well, I would, upon reviewing the material that was sent out about both firms, I think the Coleman firm, in terms of their background of positioning people in library systems similar to this, has a pretty good track record.
I just want to look at it further.
Okay.
Because I mean, we have enough problems because we can't. I mean, I'm not going to say it right now.
Yeah. And do we want to, well, also, Steve, are there other firms that maybe you could recommend for the committee consideration or?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
like I said, I mean, without actually expanding the search into areas where they have not, where they have a history finding chief executives, but not a history in finding, government executives, library executives. No, and in terms of the other, as I said, I sent out the query to the Urban Library Council listserv, asked all of them, who were you placed by? When you were a candidate, who placed you, and who have you worked with? And it was these two firms, as well as Bradbury Miller and a couple of other firms, all of which I've reached out to, and these were the two who basically said, we have room for you sometime in the next 6 months.
Right, and then we had other, and I'll just say it even though this is being live streamed, then we've had other people that don't want to work with us because we have people that can't stop talking to the media. So maybe we need to figure out some reason so that we can stop talking to the media and we can just focus on this. That's something I would like to talk with you about too, because I don't know how we stop some of it, because that's muddied the waters.
I could see that. That's a,
And it's been, and if it continues, it's going to continue to be a problem.
and it's definitely a public entity issue.
Well, I missed some of the discussion. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, John.
There are sort of two that have shown a lot of interest, and one of those,
This one here, I think you have it.
yeah, I do, but I
This one has, it has over here, the people that they've been placing.
yeah.
They've
well, I think-
clearly done a
think
lot in
both
the
of them-
library world, and she wanted to fly up.
Well, I gather both of them are fully qualified to do the job, and one of them is available to do it now,
One of them's
and
available
another
now.
one was going to wait for what period of time?
That Koya said that they couldn't engage with us until midsummer at the earliest, just
Yeah,
based
well,
on.
I would think that just tells us what we should do. We should go with the one that's available and we can interview. And if we somehow, after that interview, decide that, well, for some reason, we just don't think this is right, then we'd have to wait, and make other interviews. But I would think if
Could we not talk to both too and then make our decision? I mean, they're both good, but these people could say something that makes us say the wait could be worth it. I don't know.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. We ought to interview them. And if we are very satisfied with what we hear, then we've got our firm. If we're not very satisfied, if there's something about it that seems off key or not compatible or something of that kind, then we would want to talk to the second firm for sure. That's kind of the way I see the order of things that we would do it.
In terms of logistics and keeping the ball rolling, and I know everybody's busy, but if there is a positive outcome from the last 2 years, most everyone's comfortable with Zoom calls at this point in time. I mean, I think we could set up some Zoom calls with both of these folks, so that you all could be doing some work between now and the board meeting and be able to take a recommendation to the board. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to get trying to keep your work moving so that you can make a recommendation in May, so that we're not.
It's entirely reasonable.
Well, if we were to look at this firm, and look at it first and want to do it in person, how quickly could that be arranged?
I have no idea. I'd have to find out.
Well, it sounded like, from what you were saying earlier,
Yeah,
it sounded like they would be ready to move.
She was anxious. I mean, she was. Yeah, she
Yeah,
was.
cost.
I mean, she was willing to fly up today.
Or Southwest.
If we really thought that's what we needed to do. So yeah, I mean, it could be sooner.
Well, time is of the essence in my view, and I think that we, should try to get this person to come in as quickly as we can possibly make arrangements to get together again.
Okay.
And have an interview and discussion and be open to the fact that we, for some reason, we may feel very uncomfortable after we have that discussion, and then we can move on to the second person, and we might have to do that interview online, I don't know.
Sure.
But
I do like the fact, she was willing to come on immediately.
yeah.
This is Michael.
The only firm is willing to do it.
And Michael,
Yeah, just a comment. My opinion is the sooner the better. And I just like the response from this Coleman firm. Somebody's willing to work with us. Again, we need to talk to them, I think, a little bit more, but I think time is of the essence, and I think we need to move forward as soon as we can. That's my opinion.
thank you.
I agree with Michael. I think time is of the essence for a couple of reasons. One is our needs, and secondly, people are looking for jobs, and the best candidate for us can be hired while we're waiting around to decide on the best firms. And most candidates are going to have their resumes with each of these major firms that deal with libraries. So I think choosing a firm that deals with libraries, choosing a firm that's ready to work with us sooner rather than later, and being able to get a jump start on that process only helps us.
So in terms of the logistics and timing, what are our thoughts? Steve?
Well, if you're asking me, I can certainly call and try to set up. We're starting to get to the point though where too much more time passes and they'll be calling me one day and then the next day I won't be here anymore. So, so what I think is probably the best thing for me to do is I could call Shanna, see how quickly she could get up here, and see if that offer still stands. Basically her offer was, I'll come up here on my dime and I'll talk to your board. See if that offer still stands, see when she can come up here. We could set up a meeting around that, Zoom in participants who can't meet in person. And then at that point, hopefully everything will be good. At that point, I would pass it over to the committee and you all can start working on what engagement looks like. If for some reason that meeting, we have the meeting and it falls to pieces, then at that point I'd contact Koya and we could
Sure.
figure out what happens. Does that sound like a good plan?
Fantastic. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
thinking,
and could we do that now?
Yeah.
I liked it this afternoon.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's do it.
call now while we're discussing the other items on the agenda.
And we have our calendar too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Let me
see
work on
if
that.
they're available and
Sure.
when they are available. If they're available within the next few days, maybe we could all get
Michael's out of town.
Michael's out of town. Oh,
You're out of town the rest of this week, right, Michael?
Yes, that's correct. But you guys could still go ahead and do it and I'll just, that'd be
Next week.
okay.
Next week.
Well, let me,
yeah. Well, possibly. Let's just see when she's available.
let me call Shanna. Maybe we can patch her into this call in 10 or 15 minutes.
Maybe so.
Yeah, let me find out.
Next week's the only week I'm even. This week and next week's the only week I'm here. Then there's a chance I might be out of town for 2 Sundays.
Where?
St. Louis and Madison, Wisconsin, possibly.
Oh.
I just got back from Des Moines last night, so yay.
I say you've got a successful business.
It's been crazy. It's been wonderful. Got everything at 1. I had to leave late because I couldn't drive safely. It was so windy up there. I couldn't drive safely with the
With the
camper.
trailer?
Mhm.
Oh, uh-huh.
So
And
I
you,
went-
and you're pulling, you usually have a horse with you or?
No, it's just where the camper that I'm staying, and the horses left earlier on a semi.
Oh,
Okay, well, while Steve's making the phone call, there are a couple items that one Joyce had brought up and one I had proposed that. So Joyce, you had, when you want to mention yet?
Yeah, I was hoping Steve would be here for this, but the one that I had concerned about was just making sure that we're on the same page. It looks like we may be in the interim period where Steve won't be here before a new library director is hired. I just want us as a board to be clear that our processes don't change so that things don't get chaotic. We would still have an interim, and that would be our one and only employee. And we would still funnel things through that one and only employee. I just wanted there to be a board understanding that our processes don't change just because Steve is not here.
yeah, and who that person, we know who that person would be.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And that would be Susan, who's well
Yeah.
qualified to
Well
manage.
qualified. And, now I think though Ron had a thought earlier about the possibility of, we have a policy now
Yeah,
that would,
Exactly.
that would only be good for 2 months. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I think it's 60 days, but we can
In the
extend.
succession plan, we had two types of succession. One is a general one that I believe applies right now. Then we have an emergency one. The
Okay.
emergency ones, we get an interim director, but that person is, not eligible for promotion in a short-term time or anything like that. But if it's the general succession, then Susan would automatically slide in.
Right.
For the duration. But we can look at the policy again, 326.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
But there's no reason that we can't, for this particular instance, we want to extend that to 90 days or. But because we'd be out of the general, but not necessarily, emergencies like if he just quit some leaves.
You have a heart attack, stroke.
If
yeah.
he dies or whatever, but the general one, it looks like we will be going on beyond the 60 days.
Oh, yeah, I don't think it'd be possible to.
And that's part of her job
Well,
description.
It might be, but
I'm sorry, go ahead.
it might be possible to make a decision at that time, but it's a little unlikely. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's part of her job description anyway, so I think,
Yeah.
she's
And
mindful of it.
I don't think anybody on the board has any qualms about her being that. I mean, she probably will, she may apply for the job, then that's fine. That would be great.
Yeah, okay. One thought I had was on communication methods regarding the committee. My thought would be that if anybody has something they want to share, spread it among the committee, and absolutely it's essential that Teresa be added in as our custodian of records. And then I think the more communication, again, subject to what Megan said, is always helpful.
But sunshine law, we are a committee, an official committee, and our communications are public communication.
Yeah, but with that, emails have to be sent to custodian of records. So when we share this, absolutely subject to sunshine, because it's emails, we want to make sure that Teresa is copied in, which we will.
I think we also need to avoid having meetings through emails as well. I think it's okay to one way, but when we start engaging with that, then we're essentially having a de facto meeting online, which is not in accordance with.
Oh, yeah, I think ideas, and my thought was if people have, or any member of the committee has an idea they wish to share prior to the next meeting, that we just use email and certainly contact Teresa. And it's not necessarily that we engage in sort of big discussions on it, but
So we're not making decisions online.
Not at all.
We're just
Or
discussing.
discussions about it.
Yeah, exactly.
You're presenting, here's something to consider for the next meeting, here's my thought. But once we engage in conversations about it, then we're really muddy territory.
Well, it's just that the law applies, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, when you sent out the proposed agenda, I think that was perfectly appropriate. And we all had a chance to comment on that and suggest any changes or additions that we might did. And if those were taken into consideration, and then we published the agenda.
Super.
Yeah, that kind of thing is perfectly fine.
We are awaiting stuff. Good news.
Oh, yeah. She has a brief amount of time, like about 15, 20 minutes or so before she has to go into a meeting. I said, I thought you all would find that useful. I mean, just to talk to her for even 15, 20 minutes. So she's standing by.
You're right. Oh, fantastic.
So,
Oh, okay.
okay, I just sent her the link. So, Cody, I think you're still monitoring. I just sent a link to our meeting to a lady named Shanna Plott. So be on the lookout for her logging into the Zoom meeting.
Thank you, Steve. I will.
By the way, Steve, he does a terrific job. He's really done a great job of putting these things
Admitting
together.
Shannon now.
Oh, thank you, Cody. It's good to have a producer for this. Lots of governments
Yeah.
don't have a producer.
Right.
Hi, Shanna. This is Cody with Mid-Continent Library. Can you hear us?
Hi, Cody. I sure can. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you virtually as well.
Thank you.
The committee should be able to hear, committee members should be able to hear you now.
Great.
Yeah, we can hear loud and clear. Thank you. Thank you, Shanna.
Absolutely. I appreciate the quick invitation. I hope that Steve shared with you. I do have a search committee meeting starting in just a few minutes. My partner's going to start it without me, but I'd love to visit with you for a few minutes and then happy to circle back at a later time if that's helpful as well.
Very helpful.
Okay.
Great.
So, yeah, so go ahead, Ron. I think she's just on phone, maybe.
Hang on, I'm
Oh,
trying to
there she
get my video on.
There she
Can you
is.
see me?
Yeah, we see you. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you for being with us, Shanna. My name is Ron. We have other members of course, you know, Steve. We have legal counsel, Megan, Joyce, and one of the members of our search committee, myself, Michelle, and John. And Steve had given us,
And online, Michael.
And Michael's online.
Oh, Michael's online too. And Steve had given us copies of correspondence you sent of the 14th regarding your firm. And,
Yes.
I think all of us were very, very impressed with it. And so I'm just wondering if you'd be able to share some, just an overview of your firm, one of the 30,000 foot perspectives.
Be happy to. So my name again is Shanna Plott, and I'm with Coleman Liu Canny Bowen. We are a retained executive search firm. We're a boutique firm. We have two offices. Our main office is in Charlotte, North Carolina. We also have a small office in New York, but we do searches really across the country. We're a generalist firm, which means we cover just about every industry sector you can imagine. But we do have a meaningful presence in sort of the public-private partnership, nonprofit, governmental sectors. And separate and aside from that, though, we do searches across, higher education, manufacturing, healthcare, financial services, you name it, just about every sector you can imagine. So I am the owner of the firm. I'm also the CEO. So I manage the day-to-day operations of the firm, but I also carry a full search load. Doing searches is what I love the most. So I will always do searches, as long as I am here and part of the firm. We've got about 20 professionals between, again, the two offices in Charlotte and New York. I think maybe you've got the proposal that highlights some of our representative search work. Most notably, we did just in the last few months successfully complete the search for Charlotte Mecklenburg Library for their CEO and library director. And Steve and I spent a good bit of time speaking about that, and we did highlight it in the proposal as well. So I'll stop there and let you all ask me any questions that you'd like to.
Well, just an overview of the library. We're a $60 million annual budget, over 700 employees, 36 branches or specialty areas, and we're in search of a CEO with the qualifications to handle that rather daunting task.
Mm-hmm.
There are 840,000 patrons within our library district, so it makes us one of the larger library districts in the country. And we serve urban and rural, I guess you could say, both. We serve 53% of the city of Kansas City, for example. Mm-hmm. There's another library district that serves the other part of Kansas City, but we serve 53% of that, and 3 counties in this area. And yeah, so that's the description. And I suppose, have you had other library searches other than the Charlotte-Mecklenburg one?
No, we have done a couple of other searches for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library, but that's the only library CEO search that we've done. I think I did try to highlight a number of other searches that we've done that might be somewhat similar and transferable, not necessarily in terms of a pool of candidates, but just similar structures, financial arrangements, those kinds of things that I thought might give you a little greater highlight of some of the other experience we've had over and above libraries.
Shanna, this is Ron again. I was just curious on what the procedures are by which you go out and share the information on the opening.
Yeah. So I'll give you a very, very high level overview of our process. It's really 4 big steps of work. The first step is defining the need, and that's where we like to do this whirlwind listening tour and understand everything we can about your institution. We meet with a whole bunch of stakeholders. I will tell you, on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library search, it was the largest listening tour I've ever done on a search. And I've been doing this for a long, long time. I think we talked to over 300 stakeholders. Now, that doesn't mean all of those meetings were one-on-one. We did some focus groups. We did a survey. We used a myriad of different methods to allow folks to have a voice in really informing the specifications for the role. But once we got through that, we crafted a public-facing position description. We did have the board sign off on that to make sure that we were representing you out in the market the way that you would want us to do. But once we do that, we're off to that second bucket of work, which is really sourcing for candidates. And I think this gets at your key question, which is how do we disseminate that information? And we use a multi-pronged approach. So obviously, with your permission, we'd want to post the opportunity on our website. We'd recommend you post it on your website. I think on Charlotte-Mecklenburg, we posted it through ULC and a couple of other national organizations to push the word out that way. But then we also do a whole lot of very targeted original research that's very specific to the specifications that we got from you in that first bucket of work. Charlotte-Mecklenburg is a great example of that. You all may perhaps know Marcellus Turner, MT Turner, as he goes by, who is now the CEO and library director for Charlotte. He was in Seattle. He was not someone that was known to our firm, but we did a lot of research. He was one of many people we identified and proactively approached. And that means calling them, writing to them via email. We're very tenacious and proactive in that research. Marcellus, I don't think he'd mind me sharing. I think I had to call him about 3 times before he was even willing to entertain this opportunity. He was not actively looking, and that's really the kind of sourcing that we pride ourselves on. We're not just going after people that are actively looking for a job. Certainly, there's some good candidates to be found that fit that bill. However, I will tell you, probably more than 90% of the time, the so-called winner on our searches is someone who today may have no idea that they might consider your library director CEO role, but we've approached them, had multiple talks with them, gotten them interested, and then they've moved through the process. So that proactive sourcing is something we really pride ourselves on, and we don't assume even that any two library director searches are the same. You know, I think we would likely have a nice, robust list and some good, fresh research that would provide us the opportunity to go to market and reach some very relevant people quickly. But we're also not going to assume that what Charlotte wants is what you want. So that's where that listening tour is really, really important for us to understand the nuances that are very specific to your opportunity. The sourcing phase of the search is the one bucket of work that does not stop literally until you pick your winner. We're going to keep sourcing. We're going to keep looking until you strike a deal with the candidate of your choosing. But for sake of just moving through the process at a high level, third step is recruiting and evaluating candidates. We spend a lot of time with candidates before they ever make their way to you. We don't hand you all as a group a stack of resumes and ask you to look through and tell us who you're interested in. We're going to talk to likely hundreds of potential candidates and referral sources on this search. And anybody we bring to you, we will have spent meaningful time with. We will have probably started with a couple of initial phone conversations, phone screens. And then for the most promising candidates, we'll do a full interview with those individuals. That's usually 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours in length. So by the time candidates make their way to you, we know them pretty well. We've spent a lot of time with them. We'll meet with your committee. We'll give you the resumes. We really pride ourselves on being able to bring that paper to life. We'll give you the backstory, any other key things that you're not going to pick up on by reading a resume. So we'll give you lots of information. And then we shift into more of the advisor role. You all will start that recruiting and evaluating process, but we'll stay very close to you. We handle all of the scheduling, logistics. We can help you in terms of structuring that interview process, all of that. So we don't pass it off to you and then disappear. We're right there by your side through that process. And then last step is closing the deal. Once you get to a small group of finalists, and by the way, my goal is that you have a really difficult choice at the end of the day, because you know that you could go right or you could go left and you're not going to go wrong. So we want you to have multiple really good options, but we'll do very thorough reference checking. We'll verify educational credentials. We can facilitate background checks unless you have a process that you want to use. And then we'll help you in terms of structuring and negotiating an offer with the candidate of your choosing, knowing all the while we're sitting on your side of the table. We do not help individuals find jobs. We're all about helping organizations, institutions, regardless of the industry sector, identify and attract really, really strong leaders. So I know I threw a lot at you very quickly, and it was definitely the 30,000 foot view, but hopefully it gives you a high level understanding of our process.
That was great. Thank you. Would you be able to have that sent to us in an email or something? There's a wealth of information on that structure that I think would be good.
Be happy to.
Okay, and also if there's any, and I don't mean this as an unfair question, I'm sure it's going to come across that way, but if you have an idea about the time at each one of these elements, that would be very, very helpful for us.
So we talked a little bit about timing on my initial call with Steve, and I think every search firm's really busy right now. Anybody that's not busy over the last couple of years probably isn't worth their weight. However, this is a business that sort of ebbs and flows. So timing is good for us. We've closed several big searches just in the last 3 or 4 weeks, which means we've got capacity probably to start as quickly as you're ready to start. So, in terms of that listening tour, we can pretty much be available to start that probably quicker than you can get your list together in terms of folks that you'd like for us to dialogue with. So that piece can typically be accomplished. Again, it depends how many people you want us to engage with, but call it, 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And 4 weeks is if you've got lots and lots of people and want us to send out a survey and all of that. Most organizations have maybe, 15 to 20 individuals they'd like us to engage with, and we can typically do that in a couple of weeks' time. In terms of once we have a position description at the close of that listening tour and you sign off on it and you say, go, you're approved to go to market with this position description. I typically say in about 45 days, we can come back to you with a group of candidates, a slate of candidates who we think are qualified, interested, and worthy of your consideration. It doesn't mean that we serve it up and that's the end of the candidates you're going to see, because again, throughout the process, we'll continue to show you people who we surface as a result of that sourcing. But so, call it 45 days in. So you're 2 to 2.5 months in that you're likely going to start interviewing candidates. Most searches today take probably 4 to 5 months for an organization like yours that probably has a lot of folks that need to engage with candidates and decision-making and all of that. Sometimes they can go a little more quickly. Sometimes it takes a little longer, just depending on the circumstances on your side. I always say, we can only control how quickly we can get you candidates. We can't control that back end in terms of, how quickly you all can make decisions, how quickly you can be available to interview and move people through the process. But that's a pretty good estimate. I think Charlotte Mecklenburg Library Search took about 5 months start to finish. Now, we were early COVID. It was a weird world. And so we were all trying to figure out how you do this through those days. But we had a really good test drive and figured it out as we went. And it actually worked quite beautifully.
Thank you. The things on this end, we just met within the past couple hours to define the job description and the traits we're looking for. So hopefully we can get that to you shortly.
Great. Any other questions you'd like to ask me?
No.
Okay. I'm sorry I didn't have a more eloquent presentation to make to you, but I'm delighted that I was able to hop on with you for a few minutes. And, I'd say if you have questions as you continue to deliberate, please feel free to come back to me. I'd be happy to hop back on with you. I'd be happy to come to Kansas City and meet with you all. We actually have recruited a number of executives to companies in the Kansas City market. So that also is an area of the country that's familiar for us in terms of being able to successfully recruit there as well. But we'd love the opportunity to work with you, and we'll look forward to hearing an update when you have one.
Yeah, Shanna, thank you. Your presentation was great. And especially thank you for squeezing us in. You mentioned a busy schedule.
I was happy to do it. I'm delighted that it worked out.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Steve, thank you for arranging that. That was wonderful. Great. Well, 2 hours later, we're down to number 10, other.
Well, I just want to comment on that a little bit. You asked a good question, Ron, about the fact that we maybe are a little further along in the formation of what characteristics we're looking for in a director than most others would be.
End of the road.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, you could probably, that 5 months time, you could probably maybe cut a month off of that because of that. I don't know. But in any event, it seems like the timeline of 4 to 5 months is about right. And they do have, I'm impressed with the fact that they have just done a major library search, and Charlotte Mecklenburg is probably around our size.
It's a peer library. Yeah, it's been a peer.
Yeah, we've compared ourselves to them in the past, I think, and so I think that they're current. That's a very important part of it there, that they're current, and I think that would speed things along quite a little bit. So.
I like your comment about saying that it doesn't end until we make a decision, because if we're not satisfied with who is presented to us, they can continue to look. And
sure. Yeah.
I'm feeling like this was a good speed date in terms of the phone call.
Yeah.
I might recommend, if I could recommend, I might recommend maybe Ron, I can give you the contacts for them. Because Shanna did say previously she was willing to put you in touch with the board president of Charlotte Mecklenburg.
Okay, yeah.
And
yeah.
you could kind of talk president to president what this was like.
But I think as a committee, if somehow we could, we have 3 former presidents, and I think your perspective would be, you 3 guys, would be absolutely essential to have if we could work some kind of Cody's magic or whatever.
Well, we could definitely do that if we need to. I think what I was looking to do is that I mean, this was short, but between what was written, what was discussed, if you're feeling comfortable with this, and then maybe if there's a follow-up call between now and then, making a recommendation to the full board to engage.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just with a little bit more homework, I think the committee might be comfortable in doing that.
Yeah. How about if I contact the Charlotte Mecklenburg counterpart just as intros? And then we arrange, again, through Cody's magic, all 5 of us getting together. I'll just say, hello, this is who we are, and we'd like to set a time for us to get together through Zoom.
Yeah, and then presuming that goes well, then part of the report out of this committee could be a potential recommendation of engaging this firm. If that's your pleasure.
Yeah, if you could give me that.
Yeah, I can do that.
Like today, I'll give them a ring. I know there's an hour difference, but time zones, but
No,
we'll get it done.
yeah, actually, I think the contact, what I'll need to do is I'll need to contact Shanna because she made the offer to get the.
Okay.
Yeah, there'll be a little bit of telephone game, but I'll do my best to get it to you as soon as possible.
Perfect.
And Ron, I do think it might be useful if we just took a quick look at the firm from a legal point of view and see what litigation might have been involved in the last year or so. And, just as a kind of a test.
I can do a litigation search on her and her firm.
Okay,
Great, yeah. Any more others?
No, I think I was very, very satisfied with her presentation. It was very extemporaneous, very excellent presentation.
Yeah, keeping in mind, she was on her way into another committee meeting, and that's how she presented. So, frankly, I think it was very good.
Fabulous.
Yeah, it's good.
We want to look at our schedules, our calendars to see when we can meet again. 7. I guess the first question is.
When do you want to do it? 'Cause,
Well,
I mean, there's the next 2 weeks I'm here, but the week of the 9th, I'm gone all week. There's a possibility the week after that I may be in Wisconsin. Oh, no, I might be home a week.
Well, Michael, what time is Michael's not going to be here next week? Is that it? The entire
No.
He's gone now. Right
No,
now.
I'm gone from tomorrow through the end of the week. So,
Okay.
yep. But I'll be here the following week and have some availability, the first week in May. So,
The board meeting is May 17th. So if anything that you're doing is going to be contingent on board approving
First week
something,
of May,
after the 17th.
I'm here. The second week I'm gone, and I can't guarantee that I'm truthfully even going to be available by phone. It's just my signal where I'm at is not good the week of the 9th. So it depends if it's windy, if it's,
yeah, but that'd be the week before the board.
the week before the board meeting, I'm really not.
Sure.
So it looks like that we're pointing then on the week of starting Monday, the 2nd. May, right?
Michael, you're going to hear that?
yeah, I'm available during that week. So,
And I'm just looking at I'm real available that.
That's next week.
Yeah.
It is next- I'm trying to figure out what our to-do list is. though.
Yeah, I mean, what do we need to?
Well, I think the big one is going to be a Zoom meeting with our contact at? Start with Mecklenburg.
Or, yeah, I'd be happy with you having a conversation with.
Yeah, I don't need to be involved. I mean, unless, I mean,
Involved in that.
yeah, I think if you just call and you let us know what you think.
Okay, but let me keep the invitation open to anybody who wants to join in on this.
Sure. That's fine.
Okay, so
It
everybody's,
might be easier.
okay, sure. No, I'd be glad to very much. So the week of the 2nd is going to be amenable to pretty much, unless you're in court.
Thursday, Friday, I am out in court depositions. But I
Thursday,
could
Fridays,
do-
I'm usually
Yeah,
out of
Monday,
town.
Okay.
Tuesday, Wednesday, and I can be here when you want me to be here. I can be by Zoom when you want me to.
No,
be
I think your presence here is going to be
Okay.
absolutely non-negotiable.
Okay,
I mean, it's
Tuesday, Wednesday is
It's drop
good
dead
for me.
non-negotiable.
okay, that works for me. Then Monday
Yeah.
through Wednesday, I can make anything work.
Okay, are we, so what do we tentatively look at the 4th and,
Or 3rd and 4th, yeah.
I have an appointment the 4th at 10 in the morning, so anytime after that, like 1 on, I'm good.
I have a problem in the afternoon on the 3rd. Can we go back to the 4th?
So the 4th, I'm saying anytime in the afternoon
On the 4th.
on the 4th, I'm good, but I have an appointment at 10 that morning.
Okay,
Works for me, yes.
so the
Yeah,
afternoon of the 4th, any preference for time? Only taking into mind rush hour if we're too late.
You want to just do,
You have to go back to what?
I'm ready to cross the border in Prairie Village.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll leave that.
I'm fine.
I just have to pick my son up at 2:30.
I'm sorry, what was that, Joyce?
I just have to pick up my son at 2:30, other than that.
So.
so you want to do noon or?
Noon would be fine.
Noon, okay, let's,
We can do,
noon,
For lunch, yeah, that'd be great.
perfect.
I can do lunch if you want.
It's not going to be a crunch though for.
No.
Okay,
Noon's good for me as well.
thanks, Michael.
Okay, well, that sounds like a good plan.
And then you'll just send us out a invite later, Teresa.
Yeah.
I mean, I put it in here, but
And for that meeting, there'll be a potential report out on the president's call. Anything else?
Fantastic.
And then legal.
I'm sure something will come to mind. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry,
yeah.
Sean.
The legal search.
And then let's also simply have refined the job description. Are there some
Okay.
adjustments that you think we should make or
I can look at
from a
that,
legal
fine
standpoint?
tune
Yeah,
it,
please.
right?
Okay.
From a legal standpoint.
From a legal standpoint, and then I think especially for the 3, I say with kind of the old timers as the presidents, past presidents, from a management standpoint, that would be essential.
Yeah, and I think there were 4 items that were in the not Attorney General, but somebody's list. And we need
Secretary of
to
State.
incorporate, yeah,
Secretary of State, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the core competencies.
yeah, that's right. And we meet here, right?
Okay.
Okay, so report out on the president's call, job description, refinement report on search firm.
And I can
Okay,
bring,
so that's for the 4th.
I can bring what we did last time as far as salary range, so we can take a look.
Actually, I sent that spreadsheet to
Yes.
everybody on the committee
Okay,
just
we have
now, so
Okay.
a little bit earlier. And then for the report out of the board meeting, it's looking like talking about the engagement, the legal engagement, the job requirement, which will be refined on May the 4th, search firms as a possible action item to the full board. And then
Yeah.
others. So I'm just beginning to
No,
think
this is
about
great.
the,
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
what your report out's going to be for the full board. Sure. Okay, got it.
Anything else?
no,
Thank you all for coming and
Good
very
meeting.
much again.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah.
Again, you are drop dead, non-negotiable. You got to be here. So,
I will be here, Ron.
okay, so do we need to motion to adjourn?
Yep.
Yeah, we might.
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
we're done.